Right, citizenship was, if you look back when this was passed and made, that was meant for the children of slaves. This was not meant for the whole world to come in and pile into the United States of America, everybody coming in and totally unqualified people.
Citizenship, sir, do you believe that there are 5...
Okay, once again, brothers and sisters, it's I, Archbishop Belmont from the illustrious noble house of Belmont, and your brother from the Third Temple English Church of England. I'd like to give honors to our King, Clifford Jefferson from the Royal House of Plantagenet, to the heirs, successors, members, officers, trustees, as well as to the loyal people within the realm who are ready to hear the gospel, aka the good news in regards to who we are in this day and time and age. The day is February 3rd, 2975, which is equivalent to the 2025 Gregorian calendar. And like we say here at the Third Temple English Church of England, as well within my household, the noble house of Belmont, it is a beautiful time to be alive. So this video, or this quick segment, is really to expound about what Trump is speaking in regarding the 14th Amendment is for the children of slaves. And even though the executive order that he had just released was struck down or put on pause right after he passed it, it's bringing a pivotal question to the forefront in regards to who are supposed to be the ones that's utilizing the 14th Amendment. And now, if you've been following our page, excuse me, if you have been following our page and also been following the Third Temple English Church, you will see that we keep and constantly reiterating that genealogy is the order of the day. So this means you need to know who you are in this day and time, and also who you were prior to the creation of the so-called 14th Amendment. So therefore, you can see if you qualify underneath it. Now, many of us, especially those recently who have been helping do their genealogy, can actually see from the census records that the United States released back in the 1800s, before the so-called Emancipation Proclamation of 1865, that their ancestors were actually considered free people, or free people of color, or free Negroes, or whatever term you want to call them, during this time when our folks was considered so-called under occupation and we had to utilize this misnomers. Now, why that is important is because now they can see, just based off of that information, that they themselves wouldn't have truly qualified underneath the 14th Amendment, because they come from a lineage that was actually considered free people. Now, I want to show you who actually were some of those folks who were actually underneath that qualification, which we can say the 14th Amendment, because they technically were considered so-called slaves during the time of the creation of the 14th Amendment. So let's go ahead and take a look at what the 1740 South Carolina Negro Act. Now, I always bring this up because it's one of the easiest documents you can go ahead and find, especially for those of you who have ancestry in South Carolina like I do. And it's the only document or act of legislation that's on the record that actually specifically identify who are actually the Negroes and how they're come about to be considered slaves today. So it says, the Negro Law of South Carolina, collected and digested by John Belton O'Neill, one of the judges of the courts of law and heirs of the said state, under a resolution of the State Agricultural Society of South Carolina. So once again, this is the act of legislation. All right, we're just going to go straight to it. I like to be direct in this information. Negro Law, South Carolina. Let's go ahead and zoom in. Now, the most important section we're going to go to is going to be section 4. But it says, the status of the Negro, his rights and disabilities. Section 1, the Act of 1740, Section 1 declares all Negroes and Indians, free Indians in amity with this government, Negroes, mulattoes, and mestizos who now are free, accepted. So they didn't talk about those of you who are free Negroes or free Indians or free mestizos. It's specifically speaking about those Indians as well as those who also considered to be considered slaves. So it says Indians, to be slaves, the offspring to follow the condition of the mother, and that such slaves are chattel's personnel. So section 1, they're telling you that all Negroes and Indians that's not free are to be slaves, and their offsprings to follow the condition of the mother, and that such slaves are chattel's personnel. So that's what they call part 2 sequitur videnturem. All right, and these is all British statutes, not English, British. And we're going straight to the most important part to this because we want to know who are those so-called Negroes. Section 4. The term Negro is confined to slave Africans, the ancient Berbers, and their descendants. So this is who they're speaking in regards to, including those so-called Indians who they placed in bondage, who will qualify underneath the 14th Amendment. So as you can see, those Berbers, who are now known as Negroes, today you'll call them African American and Black, and then those Indians, these would be the copper-colored Indians, who they would call American Indians, who still technically was still looking identified or was re-identified as Negroes. Same people, they are still considered Berbers. Once you go ahead and do the research, ethnically, they're still the same people. So these will be the folks we're going to say qualify underneath the 14th Amendment that clearly Donald Trump just said was meant for the children of slaves. So you need to know who was considered those children of slaves. And in this case, it was considered the Negroes and those Indians. And the Negroes we know are technically the ancient Berbers based off of what the 1740 South Carolina Negro Act that already shown. We already verified that through the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica term Berber. And then we also showed you through the the distribution of the Barbarous tribes in 1491 map that shows you that who were the people that were here prior to the so-called creation of the United States, who were technically enslaved, and their children was put in bondage underneath the status part 2 sequitur videnturem, and underneath the 14th Amendment today would technically be considered those who had the ability to be United States citizens. But before that, they actually were subjects of the crown. So you had an option. You either had an option to either go back to who you were before the 14th Amendment, or you have an option to be a so-called citizen of the United States. Now, due to the Dred Scott case, it already told you that the United States was not created for those who was considered what? Dark skin, Black, aka Negroes or Berbers. In this case, of how they want to identify us through the legislation. But for the sake of the argument of the conversation, if they say, or they're saying within their act today, then that's what they're saying, who could have been 14th Amendment citizens underneath that, and that would be Berbers. But for those of us who have Anglo or Anglo-Saxon ancestry, we know we can never throw off our allegiance to the king. So we're bringing you your conscience regarding to who you truly are nationality-wise, and underneath your nationality, you actually have protection and rights underneath here because of the Treaty of Paris of 1783, because you were made subjects of Great Britain via the 1707 Acts of Union. So you do have a right to be here as subjects of the crown. It just depends on who you decide to be, and you playing your allegiance back to the crown, and you being who those folks were. You can't fake the funk, and you have to prove it through genealogy. If you don't have proof through genealogy, then whatever you say is considered an assumption. So once again, brothers and sisters, you have to do the great work. It doesn't matter how much time it takes, because it wasn't meant to be easy. It was meant to be hard for you, because they told you the day was going to come. You were going to have to present some type of form of evidence that showed that you have a right to be here. Just because you're born here don't mean that you have a right to be here. Many of you are born here, which will constitute you as so-called native. But when you do the research via your genealogy, you'll start seeing that you weren't here prior to the so-called creation of the United States, and prior to the so-called creation of the so-called colonies in the 1600s. So with that being said, please continue to follow, like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Make sure you visit the Third Temple English Church of England. Make sure you hit that notification bell, so therefore you can be notified whenever we upload a new video. You can be tuned. Peace.